Bismillahirrahmanirrahim, and Assalamu alaikum to all our listeners on Zoom and Facebook Live. Thank you for joining us again for a very special evening with Lauren Booth, a giant in the media industry in the UK and elsewhere, and a personal friend who I treasure. And Lauren's going to be talking about the media bias and the negative portrayal of Muslims, which is so pervasive and blatant these days that nothing surprises us, very little surprises us these days. And yep, over to you, Lauren.
Assalamu alaikum rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I pray that you're all well. I know this is going out on a Malaysian channel, but it'll be going around the world. So good evening. I'm here in Istanbul where it's 4:30 in the afternoon. Maybe you're about to break your fast, or maybe you've just broken it. I guess you've broken your fast. So I hope it was beautiful. I do miss the Malaysian food, mashallah. In fact, the other night I made some rice and I made a really thick chicken stock and I poured it over the rice, and then I put some fried onions on top. Oh, it reminded me of Malaysia. You'd have been proud, Azra, our chef, our resident chef, mashallah. So yeah, it's great to be here, alhamdulillah, and to be sharing skills. And this is something that's been really, really useful, I think. We're all taking on board new knowledge and sort of stopping and sitting with our situations for a while. So I want to praise Allah and thank Allah for, in all situations, for being with us and showing us what we need. And I confess and profess that there is no God but Allah alone and without partners, and the Prophet Muhammad is the last and final of the messengers. So I'm here today to share a little bit of my experience as a media worker. I'm a journalist, I'm a broadcaster. I've written a book called Finding Peace in the Holy Land, which was about my journey to Islam. It's really about a journey of faith. And last year I turned that with a co-author into a play, and I performed it at the largest theatre festival in the world called the Edinburgh Fringe. And it was a one-woman show, meant to be going there this year, but qadar Allah, not going to happen. So next year, inshallah. So all around the media. Currently, I produce YouTube formats for a variety of different organizations, including aboutislam.net, called Lauren Looks At, and Tayyib Way on YouTube for the Salam Initiative. So yeah, that's me in the media. Today, I'm going to be talking to you about media bias, anti-Muslim hatred, and the coronavirus. And inshallah, looking at some good news at the end, because we don't like to leave each other down, and we are the dean of positivity at the end of the day, subhanallah. So in today's session, just around 30 minutes, because we started a little bit late, I won't waffle on too long. At the end of the day, I really want to speak to you guys and hear your thoughts and feedback from where you are. But I'm going to have a little look at propaganda, the meaning and the effect. I'm going to tell you a little bit about my experience as someone who worked for 15 years in the mainstream media and then accepted Islam, and what changes I saw as a result of that. We're going to look as well, some new learning here. We're going to outline the frames and stereotypes that limit how the media can portray Muslims and Islam. Okay, that'll all become clear. And then a little bit about social media and mainstream media during the pandemic. So here we go. So firstly, let me begin by telling you that you have a problem. Yep, the problem is you. You may have the most amazing way of talking about what you believe and what you want to deliver. But you may also have found out that when you put these incredible ideas to your friends and your student community, that sometimes they come back lacking resonance, or they fail to stick with the person listening. Secondly, and worse, what if your idea, when it goes out, has the opposite effect to what you're aiming at? The lost in translation effect. I'll give you an example that always really upsets me and my daughter. A well-meaning, normally Muslim older gentleman will be describing to non-Muslim women how beautiful Islam is by saying, and how beautiful hijab is by saying, women are like boiled sweets. If you unwrap them and chew them and spit them on the ground, who wants them? At which every woman in the audience says, so I'm a spat out boiled sweet? And you think I'm trash on the side of the road? Not what he meant, right? What the uncle's trying to say is, the beauty is being wrapped up and looking after ourselves and and protection, lost in translation. So another one is, you can say for as long as you like, Islam is about peace. Islam is about peace. But the instant response from somebody from outside the context is, then why are you all terrorists? And I've literally had that said to me at a school. And I was very happy when the girl said that, the teenage girl, because we got to discuss things. And she said, no, it's about violence. So again, what are we transmitting and how are we reaching out? Well, the reason that I bring that up when talking about the media is because it's important to understand that culture mediates our meaning. And we make a mistake if we think that public understanding is an empty glass and messages are just poured in and taken at face value. That's not how it works. It's not correct and it's not productive. We need to understand how people use culture to think about our issues, and then we can dramatically and more effectively act in our role as communicators. So let's move on. This is just describing what we'll be doing today. I want to identify the issue, talk about my experience, and look at media frames. Oh, this is me. I'm particularly angry. This is a press shot of me. Must be 2010. I just accepted Islam, or just before, and that must have been just after I accepted Islam, and there'd been an attack in Gaza. And the journalist there is saying to me, but if only Palestinians were peaceful, they wouldn't be attacked so much. And that's the look on my face. So let's consider what media bias means. Media bias means partiality in the selection of events and stories reported and how they're covered. So literally put, on a journalist's desk at the Daily Mail, and in fact everywhere around the world, they'll be getting Reuters, and they'll be getting PA, and they'll be getting Andalou Agency. And these are different news wires. So it's like having all the world's newspapers vomited onto your desk or put onto your desk, and then you search through what you're going to feature that day. And then that has to go to the editor, and then he's going to tell you his choices. So it's getting thinner and thinner. But what we don't often know is that actually the choice of stories is quite slim on the ground anyway, because everybody's using the same news resources. So understanding framing is very, very important. I'll talk a little bit now about what happened to me when I came to Islam. And Azra, do tell me if I've got the right slide up. If you can see Julie Birchall, Paul Lauren Booth, just maybe give me a little sign there, because we were having some issues with slides earlier. Yep, so in 2010, in 2010, I had been 13 years in the mainstream media, around 10 years writing for a major newspaper as a commentator and a freelancer and somebody who wrote, I'm just thinking all the different, I mean, I wrote about everything. I wrote about moving to France. I wrote about comment. So many people knew me in that industry. So I appear once on camera in the hijab, October, just before this. This is Wednesday, the 27th of October. And Julie Birchall, another well-known commentator, launches into an attack in what is considered the most moderate of newspapers in the UK, The Independent. Now, I'd actually hidden my Islam for a month, knowing that, boy, when it comes out, I'm going to have to answer for everything from Salahuddin Ayyubi to, you know, paedophilia to who knows what I'm going to be asked, and I'm not ready. Well, this was the first thing that happened. This was a comment article in The Independent, and the strap line beneath this, which isn't there, it says something like, why would any rational woman embrace a faith followed by people who routinely, and the word was routinely maim and murder homosexuals and outspoken women and Christians routinely. Now, I wasn't shocked that I was going to take a bit of flack. I was like, I get this, and I might speak in a minute about why I understand the media's stance, because there's some practical reasons why they can't go into faith. But the way that Islam was spoken about really shocked me. So I wrote a letter to the editor, Simon Kellner, who I'd been drinking with many times, said, "Oi, Simon, what's this about? You know, you're meant to be a rational newspaper. You can't just say that about Islam." No response. Went to the MCB, went to different organizations, got a letter signed, sent it, nothing. They literally didn't care. So that showed me as early as 2010 just how little respect the media, the press specifically, has for the Muslim community, for Islam as a whole, and they felt they could say anything. I mean, if you replaced the words that they were using with any other faith group, you'd find it absolutely shocking. But for some reason, you put Islam there, it's open season. Let's talk a little bit about framing. I'm going to get technical here because I think it's really important. To identify frames, let's go up to this one, framing, because I'm kind of pleased that I got picture frames there. I'm kind of proud of that little thing there. To identify frames, right. So the informational content of news reports isn't as important as the interpretative commentary. Throw that sentence away now, I've said it. Pwah, horrible, right? The wording of a news piece isn't as important as the angle put on it. All right? So it's that old saying of one person's freedom fighter is another person's terrorist. One person's working mother is another person's, is another writer's, specifically a writer's, mother who neglects her children. Okay? So it's all about the angle that is put on the words. And nowhere is free from having angles. Nowhere. It's a lie that the free press in the West is putting everything before us in a reasonable way with no angles at all. It all has a prejudice, a frame, a cultural understanding on top of it. And you have yours as well, and I have mine. So there's catchphrases, there are symbolic devices that provide a shorthand way of suggesting an underlying storyline. This is also known as dog whistle politics. I'll explain dog whistle briefly. A dog whistle is something you blow. No humans can hear it, but the dogs come running. All right? So it's making a sound, it's reverberating at a certain level that those it wants to reach will hear, but it's not going to bother anybody else. Okay? So when Donald Trump talks about the wall, you know he's talking about Mexicans. And when he's talking about stopping flights from the world, you know he's talking about Muslims. All right? So these are dog whistle things. It's about rounding up your dogs, rounding up your followers, and just about getting away with it in terms of what is credible reporting or speaker phraseology. So these devices provide a bridge, and they allow discrete little bits of information in relation to one another to get through to the general public. And we see that all the time now. Although I have to say, in the last 10 years, what was shocking to me then is now every day. I think the way that the right-wing rhetoric has actually become mainstream discussion is very, very disturbing, particularly where it concerns Muslims. So in politics, framing is known in English as spin. You know, you get spin doctors. So they're supposed to put out little sound bites, yeah? They present a concept in a way which invites a value judgment. So for example, I'm going to spin taxes to you, yeah? So I'm really sorry, everybody in Malaysia, your taxes are going to go up 30%. No, everybody's out in the streets. The spin doctor will come back a week later and say, good news, we've looked at it, they're only going up 15%. Yay! Right? It's a spin you put on it. It's a news story about tax rises, but they've spun it so that into a good news story. So I'm a columnist and a commentator, so my articles are always opinionated. However, news journalism, we have a right to expect some kind of middle middle way with concern to communities, free from prejudicial framing. But that seems to be a lot to ask these days. Let's have a look now at the way, for example, that immigration is branded, is framed in the United Kingdom. So we've got refugees who are desperate for places to live. The United Nations, the European Union, they have legal ways for people from in difficult situations from, say, Syria and Afghanistan and Libya to go through a process. Even if it's a hardship, they arrive on your borders, you have a process to run through it. It's a legal thing to do. All right, there is a process that you can follow. But look how it's framed. Refugees, asylum seekers are all migrants. They're all migrants. And you know, how many more migrants can we take? So that whole agenda is about little Britain being overrun by the rats of the Muslim race. If you look in the bottom left-hand corner of that particular slide, I don't know if I can get the rest of it up, but that it's showing a woman in niqab. It's showing some really unpleasant. Oh, sorry, that's not us. Oh, that's a message. There we go. So it's showing actually something that was based on a fascist cartoon about the Jews in Europe in 1936-37. It's very similar to a Nazi cartoon, that. And the idea is of Muslims rushing in to beautiful Europe like rats. Astaghfirullah, may Allah protect us. And once we get that on the mainstream, we can see why people are easy to react and to spread hatred. How are we doing for time? Goodness me. Okay, so what is propaganda? Surely we can't fall for propaganda, right? We're too bright. We'll be able to sift through it. We're not going to fall for fake news. I mean, we're computer savvy. I'm a journalist. You're social media savvy. Everybody knows how to click and check. It doesn't take long, right? Well, modern propaganda has layers upon layers of subtlety. It uses all the media available to spread its message, including social media, press, radio, television, film. What else can we think about? Posters, yeah. They say they're propaganda for the way a society sees itself. Meetings, who we meet, how we meet. Billboards selling us things, selling us a way of life, selling us a society. How about speeches? What about the monuments in your city centre? Aren't they propaganda? Are they usually generals who've killed a lot of other people, aren't they? What about websites and awards and prizes? It's more than likely that some of these media uses are surprising, but they only serve to show how easy it is not even to recognize propaganda when it comes at us. There's an effect called the Dune effect. It was a term coined by Johnny Manzaria and Jonathan Brooke in their paper published at Stanford University. The effect, named after the movie, all I know about the movie Dune, by the way, is it had Sting in it. And I used to love Sting. Sting's from the Police. It explains that those who own and have access to the media have potential control over public opinion. And this is getting a lot easier as the pace of life gets faster. I received something today from a very good friend, an amazing sister. She does great work for the community to do with health, but she tends to send out stuff. Well, this basically said, after lockdown, the whole of the UK, you can be rounded up and put into camps and examined and this and that. And I thought, God, that sounds awful. And it was a young guy, and he seems, you know, he's kind of trendy. You know how it is, guys. So I checked this out for you, and I've printed it out. And he's reading from it. It sounds horrendous, and you're going to be forced to have these injections. My husband and I are journalists, so we sit there going, what's wrong with that picture? Well, first of all, why do you print something out? What is this, the Stone Age? I have it here written in quill pen that the British government... No, if he was serious, he'd have a slide and he'd say, right, look at this bit here, click this link, go to the government website. But we have to go through all of those stages in order to sift through something that at first seems really, really palpable. Really likely. Well, can you imagine having that deluge of information coming at you day and night about what Muslims want, about the civilization jihad? You're safe over there in Malaysia. May Allah Ta'ala bless you and protect you. And I hope to visit you again, if Allah wills, one day, inshallah. But in the rest of the world, we're not so safe. The way people see us is really, really frightening. You know, do they flinch slightly in the street? Do you get looked at regularly like somebody wants to punch you? Yeah. Do you get pushed around? Yeah. Do you get refused jobs? Yeah. And all of these things that we're talking about now are the dog whistle politics that are the undercurrents of society, making that possible. So the effect of life, if we're getting all of this different information now, how many times a day, click and send, that looks interesting. Do we even listen to it to the end, much less check the links, right? If you check the links, a lot of it is absolute nonsense. So how do we choose what we send out? Well, we often use our stereotypes, our rules of thumb, our, what's it called? The area which we speak into, right? Our little area that bounces things back at us, that bounces the messages back. We classify things according to a few key features that respond to our thinking. Well, so does everybody else on Islam. I'm going to run through now some of the global narratives that'll make it clear how Muslims see ourselves written about only in certain ways. And then I'm going to give an example of what happened with a Palestinian story. And really, we'll pretty much wrap up then, hopefully with some good news. So global narratives, that picture of the man in Pakistan, I think it was at a march. Actually, that photo has been used so many times that I'd have to trace it for you. I'm just calling myself to account here because when I saw it, I think he was supposedly shouting against cartoons about Muhammad. But if you look online, that poor fellow has just become generic for every kind of Muslim extremist yelling Allahu Akbar ever. So I can't say where the source of that is, but it's a really generic photo. And there are certain generics, certain basics, certain standards that fit into when a journalist in the West, let's say in Los Angeles, let's say in London or Paris, how they're going to unconsciously put the story through. So first of all, the global narratives. Actually, these are the stereotypes. So let's run through the stereotypes. First of all, Muslims are all the same. We want the same things. We think the same things. In Kuala Lumpur, you live exactly the same life as I do when I'm in London, right? No different at all. Well, there are standards that we have. We pray the same. We should know some of the same du'as, but everything else culturally is different. That doesn't matter. If you're a non-Muslim journalist, something arrives on your desk, we're all going to be based on the same standard, and usually it's shouty man at the protest. We're all at all times religiously motivated. Now, what does that mean? As Muslims in this beautiful, blessed month of Ramadan and beyond, inshallah, yes, guess what? We are religiously motivated. I don't have a problem with that one, actually. But then that becomes problematic when a man who never visited a mosque in his life and took drugs and used prostitutes goes and blows someone up, supposedly because he's Muslim, supposedly because he's worshipping Allah, because everything that all ranks of people with Muslims' names do comes down to Islam, right? See, that's problematic. Then there is a stereotype that we're the other. This means that there's no joining points. Like we can't like the same movies as you. We can't like ice skating. If our students, if our young Muslims are at university, they're a bit the other. You know, that feeling of distance. And when we distance someone, we make them strange. And we make people strange, we make them scary. Inferior explains itself. Orientalism says that if we're not being exotic and attractive with our lovely scents and our women hiding ourselves in the veil, which everybody wants to get beneath, then really we're pretty inferior. We've got a lesser product to offer the world. Well, I just want to add here, on the day that Turkey is sending aid to America, might want to rethink that one. And that we're impossible to work with. By that goes down to a phrase called civilizational jihad, which is used by the far right and is kind of tacitly, again, dog whistle referenced in the mainstream by, they're just a bit difficult to work with, Muslims. They have all this time off. They get tired at Ramadan, and you have to pray all the time. Well, you have cigarette breaks. You know, nobody says, oh, he's smoking all the time. You know, we have things that you do, so impossible to work with. So I'm going to take you now to a photo that's really important to me, and as an example of framing. Okay, this is an example of framing. Okay, this is Gaza in, I would say, 2007. I took that photo myself. I think it's Jabalia camp. Jabalia, yeah. I met these kids, they're on the rubble of their homes. I'd never been to the Middle East before. Just the year before, I'd only been once. And I'd never seen people living in tents on the rubble of their homes. And I was trying not to cry. I did an interview through an interpreter with these children. What do you want to do when you grow up, I asked. Well, Nadia said to me, I want to be a doctor. She has no shoes. Her hands were dirty. She lives in a tent, but she has dreams. She wants to be a doctor. I wrote it down in my notebook. And Mohammed, what do you want to be? I want to be a teacher. And Ahmed, what do you want to be? I want to be a psychotherapist, he said in Arabic. A psychotherapist? And I'm trying not to cry again because he's barefoot in filthy clothes, secondhand clothes, and he wants to be a psychotherapist. And then I said, why? He said, because my people are in pain and I want to help them. Allahu Akbar. I wasn't Muslim, but I was furious because I felt at that point that I'd been tricked by all of the press that I'd been reading about Muslims to having such an extreme prejudice that I didn't see these children as individuals until I met them. I wrote the article. I sent it back to London. It was for the Mail on Sunday, one of the most right-wing, rabid anti-Muslim papers. But I did get on well with my editor at the time, Peter. I said, Peter, I feel really strongly about this. If you're going to change it, I'll pull the whole article. Now, this was a sackable offence. Nobody gets to tell an editor that. But he said, it's a great piece, Lauren. We really like it. And we're going to run it on 4 pages of the magazine. Subhanallah, Allahu Akbar. I didn't say Allahu Akbar at the time, I'm saying it now. I thought I've changed the world. I've made 2 trips to the Middle East and I'm already changing the media. Yeah, I was so happy. I called all my Palestinian friends. You've got to see this. This is world changing. I've done it in the Mail on Sunday. I've got positive stuff about the Palestinians and truths in there. And on Sunday, it came out. And here was the headline. Which of these children will be a doctor and which are terrorists? Which of these children will be a doctor and which are terrorists? The caps are my own. But those are the words that appeared on the front page of the magazine over my words and the photo of the children who'd wanted to save people. If you already didn't like brown kids from a dirty part of the Middle East that had been bombed, you didn't need to read anymore. You'd already had your mind made up. And which frame does that fit into? Well, actually, it fits into quite a lot of the global frames. Security and identity, they're a risk to us. The Middle East, generic issue. Religion, we don't do, their religion makes them violent. Islam, Islamism, it just fits into all of those. Those kids, as far as the international media goes, they didn't have a chance. Didn't matter what piece they came at me with, didn't matter how much me as a journalist made the notes and religiously then copied them into an article. That was the headline. I went to bed for 2 days, by the way, crying. I was absolutely disgusted. A study has found that the Mail on Sunday newspaper has the most negative coverage of Muslims living in the UK. This was 2019, with 78% of its stories featuring negative themes, above the already high industry of 59%. That's the industry standard for the UK, is that 59% of articles will negatively, articles mentioning Muslims at all, 59% will have negative themes. 59%. SubhanAllah. So with the last couple of minutes before we go to Q&A, I just want to take a little look about how the coronavirus is being used by some unscrupulous agencies to cause problems for Muslims around the world. And there's if you go on, unfortunately, to Twitter right now, you can put in hashtag Corona Jihad, and you'll find all sorts of pleasantries there emanating from India, such as, so people are talking about bio-jihad now in India and Corona Jihad. And this is a quote from Time magazine. Amir Ali is an assistant professor of political science at Jawaharlal Nehru University, and he was speaking to Time magazine last month. He says, these are just the latest in a series of different forms of jihad that the media is talking about that have been spread on social media and that people are gleefully accepting. Population jihad, for example, is a common trope in Hindu nationalist messaging, claiming that Muslims are trying to turn India into a Muslim nation by reproducing at a faster rate. This is kind of a very common trope as well in far right in the across Europe. Love jihad is a phrase used when Muslim men apparently trick Hindu women into romantic relationships in order to convert them into Islam and have more Muslim babies. But Corona Jihad is the most outrageous one so far, surely, because people are really being infected and they're dying. And our Muslim brothers and sisters in India, on top of the fear and the poverty that they already live under there, they are being beaten for being accused of spitting into water sources in order to spread corona, to deliberately touching people with their dirty Muslim hands in order to spread the virus. A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. And if we take a look at the power of what a cartoon can do. Indian authorities have linked dozens of cases of COVID-19 to a Muslim missionary group earlier, and that was problematic. But what's been said since, Islamophobia has been transposed onto the coronavirus issue. It was Tablighi Jamaat, unfortunately. They had a gathering they weren't supposed to, and that allowed the media to run all kinds of twisted stories about Muslims deliberately wiping out Hindus, which is weird because, yeah, it really does other Muslims, because don't we get coronavirus too? What if the Muslims are spreading coronavirus? Yeah, pretty nonsensical, isn't it, right? The way that this is transmitted is social media. So I just want all of us here to agree to be more careful about what we share and not to get embroiled with lies and fake news from our side. And we've got to be more careful about what we share, inshallah ta'ala. So I think I'm going to wrap up now with a quick overview from Turkey. So coverage of the coronavirus pandemic is a case in point when it comes to prejudicial coverage within which news journalists just don't see how they're framing things. If you can get a picture of a Muslim who's got, and there's been a lot of this, in hijab with a mask on, and talk about the virus spreading, why not use that? It's so subliminal, the journalists and the photo editors don't realize they're doing it now. This BBC one is a genuine clip, Trudeau and his wife isolate. Well, that was actually, that was said to be under a photo of Turkish fans, but if you look, that's probably a live banner coming up underneath. So we'll excuse that one, but this one in CNN, Austria announced its first death from coronavirus. Why are they showing a mosque being hosed down? Why? Why not show something more typically Austrian? What relevance has that? What links is that making in the brain? How about this one From again, the Independent, the voice of reason, the middle of the road Independent. Tapping phones and locking down streets, how governments could exploit coronavirus with, yep, good old Erdogan on the cover there, used to epitomize how wicked, brutal leaders could cash in on the coronavirus moments. The BBC has used irrelevant images from Turkey in its coverage of the crisis for 2 consecutive days. This is last month, despite criticism from the Turkish authorities. In the first instance, the BBC, the New York Times and CNN International all decided to use images related to Turkey and Istanbul with their news stories about the virus in France. Later, the BBC used an image showing Turkish football fans wearing the Turkish flags and putting on masks with the headline, "Trudeau and his wife isolates after she tests positive." So the Turkish government felt that that was illegitimate and that was linked together. Criticism of linking images of Turkey with the virus outbreak has come from the Turkish embassy in Washington, which challenged CNN International for deliberately using irrelevant photos. So again, a photo paints 1,000 words. I've given you a lot of information to take in here, but I think one of the most interesting things is that there's good news coming out as well. And the good news is, brothers and sisters, bi'idhnillah ta'ala, Allah Ta'ala has sent us to the naughty step. Surely he has put us in lockdown, but also he has treated us like teenagers who are grounded. There's so much that the world cannot do right now and so much that the Ummah has to offer. We can turn this around and we don't have to put up with it. I have stopped for a couple of years presenting on Islamophobia because all too often it can send us away with a feeling of, forget it, there's nothing we can do, but there's plenty. People are waiting for us to change the world and they don't know it. We are the nation who are the ones to challenge evil and to bring goodness, subhanallah. So with aid, we can have impact. Our impact is our true stories. And here's just some of them coming out right now. New York City will distribute 500,000 free halal meals to Muslims during Ramadan. It doesn't actually say all of those who are giving in New York City to the homeless. Well, this does. Muslim Hands joins forces with 30 charities to help with the coronavirus emergency. And this, Turkey sends a plane full of emergency equipment to the UK as the death toll nears 9,000, much past that now. Where's the photo of President Erdogan though? I hope that's been useful. May Allah Ta'ala bless you and may he give us the best in this life and the next, and always be positive. And may Allah Ta'ala bring us out of this time of plague and into better times ahead. Barakallah feek. I look forward to your questions, inshallah.
Thank you, Lauren, for that. Do you want to bring your slides down?
Yep.
Yep. So, thank you very much. Talk as well. I don't know if you're aware of a question here, but I've just got to contextualize that first question. We've seen quite a bit of hate speech against Rohingya refugees here in Malaysia in the past 3 weeks, just before Ramadan started. And so the question asked is, your presentation focuses on the Western media, where here in Malaysia, we've got this hate speech too, right? How do you address that? How would you address that?
So ask again, what's the actual question, Azra?
So how can Muslim majority countries deal with propaganda and hate speech in our own media, right? We've got it too.
So again, it's making sure that you have good mainstream organizations who can take the headlines one by one, assess them, and then send them back to the organizations. So one person shouldn't do it on their own. You'll exhaust yourselves. And I think this is what often happens if you're an activist. You'll get targeted and maybe different groups will attack you. So it's all about having groups who specialize in freedom of speech and making sure that every single one of the prejudicial headlines is made to impact on the paper itself. So groups getting in touch and saying, we're not buying your product anymore. You know what, your big sponsor, we're not buying from that store anymore because they're paying for prejudicial news reporting. So it's about the economy, and it's also about unity.
But a lot of this hate speech is being circulated by individuals via social media. How do we deal with that?
If it's hate speech, then you have to go to the platform, and you have to, again, it's numbers. If Azra goes to Twitter and says this is hate speech in Malaysia against Muslims, Twitter will go, yeah, that's a shame, we'll look into it. If 10,000 people go, they will start looking into it, and that account will be taken down. So there is a lot of positive action. You can make a difference, but it does take numbers.
All right, next question. What are some news sites you would recommend that are least biased?
That's a really good question. That are least biased. Do you know what? I don't really have one. I like Media Monitor. I like Media Monitor, and I mean, I honestly just dip in and out because they're all biased. I mean, for example, I like watching TRT World. I like watching RT, but I know where they're coming from. So I think the thing is to know where they're coming from, and to kind of take a pick and mix. I also watch with my husband some stuff coming out from America. We even watch Fox News from time to time, although it just makes you physically ill, just to see what everybody's saying. So if you have the stomach for it, dip in and out of different things.
Okay, that's good. Good to know. Now, the general public. Is the general public interested in the truth, or what validates their beliefs, do you think?
We're now in an age where it's all about belief validation. We are post-truth in that way, which again brings us down to where does that leave us? Making the loudest noise, the best product, the best movies, filling the space with amazing tales. This is also a time of storytelling. That's what Instagram is all about, right? It's about telling your stories. Facebook has become about telling your story. So make interesting stories. Put money into your building. There's a brother called Omar Reagan. He's trying to get Halalywood together in America, and they've made 1 or 2 movies, and they just can't get it. The Muslims aren't putting the funding together. So I know that Dato Tun Mahathir, Imran Khan and President Erdogan talked about having a media initiative. Well, the thing I'd say to them is, number one, nobody else around that I've spoken to who are reverts to Islam and in the media have heard you made any approaches. So what's going on? And secondly, don't announce it, do it quietly. Just get people on board. Come, right. What? Why announce it so everybody knows so they can attack it?
Now, when would you say did this media bias start? How far back?
Well, that's a difficult one for me to answer, because as I've been Muslim 10 years, I'd be absolutely tone deaf to it. I'll tell you when it did start, though, before any of us were born, the Crusades. That's when false news coming about these flesh-eating maniacs of the Middle East who'd occupied Jerusalem, bloodthirsty rogues. That's when it really started coming through the church in Rome and their ambassadors. So it's thousands of years old.
Now, final question: what can the individual do, right, to change the portrayal and the perception of Muslims?
Right. So here's something I'd recommend today, and it's something we can all do. Fill your timeline with positivity. Don't read about negative things, and the websites that are putting that stuff out, don't forward it. Do you know a negative portrayal of Muslims gets so many hits and gets so many likes, and most of them are from Muslims? So there are racists out there who are like, I'm just going to say something awful about Muhammad today and I'll get 1 million hits, and 600,000 will be from Muslims. So we're literally empowering them and making them famous. Find out the groups on your social media platforms who are doing amazing things. There's Green Dean, there's environmental groups, there are groups helping hospitals, there's people doing stuff with children, there's Sisters Azra looking out for Palestinians. Join positive movements and leave the rest and build something else.
Thank you very much, Lauren Booth, all the way from Istanbul. It was a pleasure having you, and a very enlightened evening. I'm sure we benefited, most of us. I may have one last question. Yes, can I? One last question? It just came through. All right. Do you think that media bias concerning Islam in specific areas, that media bias concerns Islam in specific areas such as social, spiritual, and political issues, but not economic? The reason being, more positive things can be found on media talking about Islamic finance, social finance, modest.
Sorry, Azra, you're breaking up there.
Can help the economy grow. No? Do you hear me better? No?
I think that sounds like a very long and serious question. That
yes,
has almost,
it is.
I think whoever sent that, I think you've answered it very well yourself. And thank you for your contribution. I think in areas like economics, if it's not being so attacked, it's because there's money in the ummah. And maybe we need to be a bit more positive in our other areas as far as impact goes. Let's be more impactful, because when you have impact, people have to write about that, and the media is a hungry beast. So Allah bless you all. I'm going to go now. I'm going to get an hour's sleep before my next Zoom recording. May Allah bless you, and lots of love to you all. See you soon, inshallah.
Thank you again, Laura. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.